Just before 2 on the afternoon of September 15th, 2003, a white hatchback sat parked on Willis Street in Kingsford, a suburb in the eastern half of Sydney, Australia. It was facing the wrong way, in a zone marked no stopping. 3 people were inside, and no one recognized them. A young man named Tony came up the outdoor stairs from the university below. He was moving fast. A classmate greeted him on the way past and got nothing back. No answer, no smile. It wasn't like Tony at all. He walked to the car, took the bag off his shoulder, opened the rear door, and got in. The car pulled away, heading east and carrying Tony roughly a quarter of a mile, just a 5-minute walk away. Then the car dropped him at the front door of the apartment he lived in. Within half an hour, Tony was dead. So was his roommate. This is the case of the Sydney double murders. At around 2:15 p.m., Rampuni Tiwary was startled awake by noises coming from outside his bedroom. He heard something falling, shouting, people running past his room. There was pounding on his door, and he thought he heard his roommate, Tony Tanpo Chuan, scream for help, but he wasn't sure. He had no idea what was happening. Maybe a break-in? It was hard to tell. In a moment that he would later recall with a sense of regret and shame, instead of going out to see what was happening, he decided to lock and barricade his door. And then he waited, heart pounding. Suddenly, the sound stopped, and he decided to leave his room. What greeted him was a nightmare. Blood everywhere, the table upended, furniture shoved from position. Blood spatter on the walls, floor, ceiling, and at the end of the hallway, Tony, sitting with his back to the wall, legs spread, covered in blood. A knife and bat lay beside him. Ram walked toward the bat, grabbing the handle. He gained the courage to walk back and close the back door. Then he saw the second body, his other roommate, Chow Lyang, lying bloody and battered behind the sofa. Ram checked for breathing, for pulses. Chow Liang's flesh was cold. He stumbled back to his room, locked the door, and called Australia's emergency number, 000. The operator told him to leave the bat and get to the ambulance, but there were no ambulances outside. He looked around wildly, spotted them parked 65 feet away, and sprinted toward them. Police arrived not long after to find 2 dead students and 1 traumatized survivor covered in small specks of blood. What had happened that day? Well, before we get to that, we should learn more about the 3 men at the center of this case. In 2003, 3 young Singaporeans were studying engineering at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. Tony was 26. Back in Singapore, his parents, along with his sister, were proud of his achievements. He was studying at the university under an Army scholarship, a prestigious and competitive award promising Tony a bright future. And he was married too. Tony and a woman named Yokar Loy tied the knot in a civil ceremony in February 2003, though, according to his parents, it was a move made more out of kindness than love. Chow Lyang was also 26. His parents were food vendors in Singapore. He didn't have a scholarship, and so his parents paid for his education out of what they earned. He's married his high school classmate, Winnie Lyang, in a civil ceremony at a government registry in Singapore, with the understanding that the real wedding would happen when he graduated. Classmates described him as conscientious. Ram was the youngest at 24. He was studying mechanical engineering on an Army scholarship. His friends called him Rex and Ranger. His girlfriend, Elvira Metelyevich, told police he was calm, that he didn't lose his head, that he was the type to walk away from a situation rather than let it escalate. Several friends independently described him the same way. He was a peacemaker. The 3 shared the upper floor of a red brick duplex at 109 Barker Street, Kingsford, 5 minutes on foot from campus. Chow Lyang held the lease and collected the rent from Ram and Tony. They were friends. They watched movies together. They were three men a long way from home, doing the same difficult thing at the same time. So, what happened that day? The weekend of September 13th and 14th that year seemed, from the outside, like nothing. On the Friday night, Ram went to a mooncake festival party, arriving around 10, tired from work and short on sleep. Saturday morning, he met friends at a McDonald's. And then he went to Rebel Sport, a chain sporting goods store, and bought a baseball bat as a novelty, he said. Coincidentally, Tony had told friends weeks before that he wanted to buy a baseball bat for protection. Whether or not he did, we don't know. On Saturday night, Ram worked a security shift until midnight, then talked to his girlfriend until 2:30 in the morning. Sunday, he worked another security job, a full day at a private school. He got home around 7 in the evening, exhausted. Tony and Chow Lyang were in the living room watching The Lord of the Kings on DVD. Ram sat with him for a while, trading comments about the film. At around 9, Tony went to his room to study. Ram went to bed. Chow Lyang stayed on the sofa with the movie running. That, Ram says, is the last time he saw either of them alive. Monday morning started normally, and we know that because of their computer records. Chow Lyang last used his computer that morning, though sources differ on exactly what time he stopped. Tony was working on his thesis, sending emails to his supervisor. His machine was switched off at 12:02 p.m. This, on its own, gave no indication of any issue, but something had already gone wrong, and the first sign of it was an absence. Tony and Chow Lyang left for their midday lecture together every day at 11:45. That Monday, they didn't. Tony left late and alone. Chow Lyang, a student who didn't miss a class, never left at all. Sometime around midday, someone came up behind Chow Lyang while he sat on his computer in the living room and violently struck him in the head with a baseball bat. He went down immediately. He was still breathing, but unconscious, his skull badly damaged. He would lie on that floor, dying for about 2 hours. Tony arrived at the noon lecture late and by himself, and the people who saw him there all noticed the same thing. Something wasn't right. One classmate told police his hair was messy, which was strange because Tony always used gel and kept it neat. A student named Kevin Teo leaned over and whispered, "Why are you late?" Tony smiled at him vaguely and said nothing at all. Kevin later told police Tony seemed restless the whole time, turning his head, looking around the room as though he were watching for someone. Then Tony told Kevin to cancel the ethics tutorial they had planned for later that afternoon. Chow Lyang, he said, had something to do. What exactly that was is unclear to this day. At roughly midday, Chow Lyang was lying on the floor of their apartment with a shattered skull, and Tony Tan, in a lecture theater across campus, already knew his roommate would not be coming to university that day. Nobody has ever established how he knew. The lecture broke up early at 1:50. Outside, Tony told another student that he was tired and going home to sleep. Jonathan Choi saw him going up the outdoor stairs toward Willis Street, moving quickly, no greeting, no smile, which Jonathan specifically noted was out of character. And at the top of those stairs was the white car, parked the wrong way in a no-stopping zone with 3 occupants whom witnesses described as being of Asian appearance. Sean Murray watched Tony take his bag off and get into the back. The car took him home. When investigators later tried to reconstruct Tony's last 20 minutes alive, one object on the stove confused them. There was a frying pan on the burner with chicken wings in it. The bottoms were burnt. It was too much food for one person. Who was he cooking for? No one knows. And from that point on, there is only one witness. Everything you heard in the account at the start, the banging, the discovery of the bodies, comes from Ram. It's the account he gave police that afternoon, and it has not changed since. No part of it has ever been independently corroborated, but no part of it has ever been disproved either. He says he was asleep in his room. He was awoken by a commotion, locked the door, and when the sound stopped, he came out to find his roommates dead. The forensic details told a violent story of their deaths. Tony had been struck at least 15 times with a baseball bat. The blows broke his teeth and his glasses. He had also been stabbed 5 times in the neck with a kitchen knife, and those wounds were deep. One went through his voice box, another penetrated the base of his tongue. He had defensive injuries across the backs of his hands. He had fought. He had also tried to leave. There was blood on the outside of the front door's keyhole, meaning he reached the front door. But his body was blocking it. He never made it out of the apartment. Lyang had been hit at least twice with enough force to shatter his skull and damage his brain. His left index finger was crushed and torn. He had raised his hand. Then, roughly 2 hours after that first attack, while he was still unconscious on the floor, he was stabbed in the neck and the forehead. It was determined that he and Tony were killed at effectively the same moment. So the afternoon runs like this. One man is disabled at midday and left unconscious in the apartment. The other comes home 2 hours later, potentially walks past him, depending on which door he entered through, and puts a lot of food on the stove. And then both are killed within minutes of each other. Ram cooperated with the investigation. During the same period, he moved into a different apartment, kept studying, kept working. Life continued largely as normal. On May 27, 2004, he phoned Detective Mark Frierson and asked whether he could go to Singapore. University wasn't going well, and he had things to take care of back home. 10 minutes later, Frierson rang him back and asked him to come in for what he described as a final interview. Ram arrived at the police station in Maroubra, a neighboring suburb, at 7:30 the next morning. He put his hand out to shake. Neither detective took it. Instead, they arrested him for murder. This is what the prosecution believed happened. Ram was inside the apartment. Both killings happened in a space of a few hundred square feet with him in it, behind a door he admits he'd locked and barricaded rather than open. He had bought a baseball bat 2 days earlier. Forensic testing at the state laboratory confirmed that a bat was used to kill Tony. Fragments of the plastic shrink wrap from the packaging of a new bat were recovered from Tony's clothing and from inside his wounds. That day, Ram also had Tony's blood on him. There were visible specks on his hands, microscopic traces on his feet, his t-shirt, and his shorts. The prosecution's reading of that pattern was deliberate, that the visible blood on the hands was left there on purpose to support his story about checking for a pulse, and that the microscopic spatter was what he failed to notice. When a police officer spoke to him outside the building, he was picking at the blood around his fingernails. The officer told him to stop. He stopped. In the back of the police car, on the way to the station, he started again and had to be told a second time not to disturb the traces of blood on his hands. Back at the apartment, there were no signs of forced entry. There was also a financial angle that could have been a motive. The prosecution alleged Ram owed Chow Lyang 5,045 Australian dollars in unpaid rent, an amount worth roughly $3,300 at the time. And that Ram owed the university fees on top of it. He had failed classes and breached the terms of his scholarship, putting him in debt. And so, according to the prosecution's theory, on the morning of the 15th, after Tony left, an argument over the debt escalated, and Ram beat Chow Lyang unconscious. 2 hours later, Tony walked in, and Ram killed him because Tony was able to place him at the scene. Then he cleaned up what he could, waited, and called for help. The prosecution's version is plausible, but there are holes in the story. The bat and the knife recovered from that apartment carried Tony's DNA, but neither one carried any trace of Chow Lyang's DNA. The shrink wrap fragments found on Tony's body and in his wounds were not found on Chow Lyang at all. 2 men were beaten and stabbed in the same apartment on the same afternoon. Only DNA from one of them was on the weapons. The obvious explanation is that the weapons were cleaned, but crime scene investigator Christopher Clark found no evidence of blood having been washed down any drain in the apartment. Sergeant Philip Elliott examined the bathroom just over an hour after the emergency call, and his statement was that the shower recess, the laundry tub, and the hand basin were dry. No blood-stained clothing was recovered, no cleaning materials, nothing that had been washed. Which leaves another possibility, that different weapons were used on Chow Lyang and were carried out by whoever brought them. Regarding the blood found on Ram, several expert witnesses, including neurosurgeon Dr. John Matheson, testified that given the injuries to Tony's throat and airway, a cough reflex could have expelled blood onto someone leaning over him. Ram's account that he checked for a pulse and Tony coughed on him is medically consistent with what was found in that hallway. And then there is the money. In June 2003, 3 months before the murders, at a point when Ram supposedly owed him over 4,000 Australian dollars, Chow Lyang wrote to a friend on ICQ, an instant messaging service. His words were that Ram was paying his rent that month, which left him a couple of hundred spare. At the apartment, police recovered handwritten notes belonging to Chow Lyang. One of them read March with Ram's name and a figure of 1,148 Australian dollars, which was worth around $750 US. Ram's explanation was that 1,148 Australian dollars was his share of the rent for January and February, from when he had been back in Singapore. He said that the note was written in March, about the period before he returned. A second note in the same handwriting doesn't record a debt at all. It records cash Ram had paid. These records brought the debt into question, but none of that reached the first jury. The trial opened on May 16, 2006, nearly 3 years after the killings, before Justice Michael Adams. Ram pleaded not guilty. The fight was over the blood. Under cross-examination, both Sergeant Elliott and the forensic biologist called by the prosecution conceded that they would have expected to find DNA from both victims on the murder weapons. Ram's defense lawyer put it to the jury that the absence of Chow Lyang was the most striking feature of the entire crime scene. The judge, for his part, described the DNA evidence as the clincher. The jury took 5 days to reach a verdict. On June 21, 2006, Ram was found guilty on both counts. On November 7th, he was sentenced to life without parole for Tony's murder and a concurrent 25 years for Chow Lyang's. He was 27 when he entered a maximum security prison. Fights with other inmates cost him partial sensation in his right thumb and left him with a scarred shoulder. But he was determined to make something of his time there. He taught himself law, learned about appeals, evidence, and the machinery of the system that had incarcerated him. In Singapore, Tony's family believed it was over. Chow Lyang's family said nothing to anyone, and never has. 23 years on, one of these families has spoken to reporters, courts, and a documentary crew, and the other has not spoken publicly at all. On December 17, 2008, the Court of Criminal Appeals set aside the conviction and the sentence and ordered a retrial. The retrial began on August 31, 2009. Ram was 30 by this point. This time, the ICQ messages went in front of the jury. So did the notes. The motive the prosecution had presented in 2006, that Chow Lyang had been killed over a fight regarding a debt, was now being brought into question by Chow Lyang's own notes. The jury deliberated for 17 hours, but could not agree unanimously. Under New South Wales law, they returned a majority verdict, guilty on both counts. On December 17th, 2009, Ram was sentenced to 48 years, backdated to his arrest in 2004. It was less than life, but if he served his full sentence, he wouldn't be released until he reached his 70s. 2 juries, 2 convictions, and a man who had not changed his story once. Then came the second appeal in 2012, which turned on 3 things. The first was the tone of his voice on the emergency call. The prosecution has used it to suggest it sounded wrong for a man who had just found the bloodied bodies of his friends. The defense argued that this is not something you can reliably tell about a person in the worst minutes of his life. The second was the behavior of the victims themselves. Lyang missed a lecture he never missed. Tony arrived late, disheveled, scanning the room, telling a classmate that Lyang had something to do. And the car. The judges wrote it into the judgment themselves, that those people undoubtedly drove him to his unit, that once inside he began cooking a meal consistent with food for a number of people, and that whoever these people were, they'd never come forward to assist the police. And finally, there was the forensic evidence. No trace of Lyang on Ram or on the weapons. A dry bathroom, no discarded clothing, and an innocent explanation for the blood that was there. The Court of Criminal Appeal was not sitting as a third jury. It was not asked whether it personally believed Ram Tiwary killed anyone. The question in front of those judges was narrower. Whether a jury, acting rationally on this evidence, could properly have convicted at all. They decided it could not. On July 26, 2012, 2 days after the hearing, they quashed both convictions and acquitted him. In their reasons, they recorded that their individual emphasis differed, but that all of them reached the clear view that there was a reasonable doubt about Ram Tiwary being the murderer. By his own account, he had served 99 months. He wasn't released. He was moved to Villawood, an immigration detention center outside Sydney, and held there for about 6 weeks while prosecutor decided whether to challenge the acquittal and while Singapore issued him a new passport. The prosecutors didn't challenge it. On September 19, 2012, he landed in Singapore for the first time in more than 8 years. Reporters were waiting. He declined to say anything out of respect for the families of the 2 men he had lived with. He never finished his degree. The army career the scholarship was pointing at was gone. In 2014, he published a memoir about the case and called it 99 Months. Asked about the man he had been before September 15, 2003, he said he couldn't recognize himself. 23 years on, nobody has been convicted of killing Lyang and Tony Tanpo Chuan. 2 juries were sure Ram was guilty. 3 appellate judges found that no jury should have been. Regardless, neither of these things tells you who was in that white car, why Tony got in, or who he was cooking for that day. And no one has explained why no traces of Lyang's DNA were on either weapon. Lyang's parents have never given an interview. Tony's mother did. When she was told the man convicted of killing her son had been acquitted, she said her heart was in pain. And then she asked the question that has been sitting over this case ever since. If it wasn't Ram, then who was it? That is all for today. Thank you for watching.